We're hoping that the clouds here in Hoskas are going to release some rain soon, which they haven't yet. हम बता रहे थे कि बारिश हो रहा है. Was it in Pradeep ji, आपके यहाँ हो रहा था बारिश?
Yeah, it is in Noida. Yeah,
already.
It is in Noida.
Yeah, it's raining.
Light rain or medium or what?
Right now, heavy now.
It is
Really?
heavy now. Yeah. Yep.
Well, enjoy. I hope it doesn't create flooding. According to Guardian, 1/3 of Pakistan is under threat of floods.
Yeah.
And more than 1,000 people have died. And goodness knows how many animals would have perished. So we should remember our brothers and sisters across the border.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, we'll start now. Thank you all very much for taking time out. It's often a time of day when one just wants to relax or go to sleep after a busy day. So I'm very grateful to all of you for turning up, showing your interest. It's very kind. And I hope it will be beneficial. Let's start by really performing an act which is something connected with, really we're proclaiming our basic willingness to engage in sanity rather than insanity. So insanity here might be defined as our mind being distracted and everywhere except the present moment, the present situation, but kind of jumping around like, you know, those little toys, you get those little balls, the bouncing beams, they bounce all over the place. Or like, of course, the traditional example of the monkey going from branch to branch of the tree in search of some stimulation. And also, of course, it's likened to a mad elephant. Apparently, elephants, when they go a little bit crazy, that's really something to look out for. Very dangerous. In the story, of course, Buddha was confronted with a mad elephant, or maddened, through the devices of his jealous cousin, Devdatta. And it's interesting that through the power of his, I presume, his presence, his courage, lack of fear, his attention, and of course, loving kindness, the Buddha, I'll put it this way, the elephant was completely pacified, coming in contact with Lord Buddha. The mad elephant was pacified through the power of attention and love. So maybe there's a lesson there for us as well, that the power of attention, not love on its own, because love on its own might be a little bit scattered or a little confused even. But here we're talking about an attention, an attentive love, a caring love. How else could we really help others if it's not through an attentive love? You know what I mean? To show our practical, to help others practically, our love needs to be channeled, right, into something, whether it's changing a nappy or helping someone cross the road or whatever it is. It needs the power of attention. So anyway, let's pay attention now to our body. Now, as you sit, which means we're not concerning ourselves with what happened to me, you know, yesterday or as a child or whatever other stories our mind brings up. What's happening for my body now? What are the sensations in my body that I can feel right now? going to have to pay attention for there to be awareness of that. We can't just be anywhere, can we? It's something very, as we say in English, very nitty-gritty. It's the present moment. Student of Tushita today was asking me, don't we need to plan for the future? I said, there can be plans for the future, but if we're constantly turning to the future, then when are we ever living now? When are we ever paying attention to the present, to what's happening now? We're forever kind of mortgaging ourselves to the future. We're never really there now for ourselves or others. So what do we expect we're going to be like in this so-called future? If in the present we can't be present, we're not experiencing our life. Actually, we are leapfrogging always into the future through anxiety, fear, expectation, hope, which is a crazy way to live or to exist. It's hardly living, is it? Living suggests present tense, something being engaged in now, not the future all the time. Which doesn't mean we can't book a ticket with a plan to go somewhere. But of course, it doesn't mean that it'll happen. Life doesn't always turn out the way we want, does it? At least not for me. So let's be in the present moment. A good way also for that is to connect with your breathing, which means just that, your breath right now. The sensation of it, not the word, not an image which arises when you hear the word, but the actual sensation of your breath, which means you're going to have to feel it somewhere. So we feel it at the nostrils. If you're sensitive, you might be feeling it in many places in your body. So be aware of that. Which means we need to slow down. And we might be aware that as we breathe out, there's a sense of relaxation. It's a different feeling, isn't there? Different sensation, the out breath compared with the in breath. There's no conflict, but they're different, aren't they? Out breath is a kind of dissolving or letting go. Check for yourself. Don't take my words for the truth. Words, anyway, can never be the truth. Words maybe point towards something. Point towards their deeper meanings, at least. And you might, some of us might find that when we breathe out, there's a kind of a natural space or gap at the end of the out breath before we breathe in again. Unless, of course, we're in such a hurry to breathe in again due to habit of impatience or fear, if we're fearful or anxious, we might be breathing in a different way. But if we're a little bit relaxed, there may be a gap at the end of the out breath. Don't try to force it. Don't be upset if you can't find a gap. It's perfectly okay. Okay, now that we might be just a little bit more centered and stable, one might even say. And I hope we've also been aware of our posture, that it's upright, so shoulders level, arms a little bit away from the main body, from the torso. Feet well placed on the ground, if you're on a chair, or if you're sitting cross-legged, be aware of the sensation of your knees and lower legs in contact with the cushion, or sofa, or whatever. And the back of the neck slightly elongated so that your head is tilted slightly downwards, slightly forwards. Not so much that your chin is touching your breastbone, but a little bit tilted forward. And it might seem a little strange for us modern, urban, busy people not to be asked to do very much right now. We're being just asked to sit and be aware of breath. And we might feel very restless. That's okay, it's another appearance arising in the space of the mind. If you remember, mind is an arising, and then there's an engaging, a knowing happening. Phenomena are appearing and being engaged with. So can we engage with them in a very soft and gentle way without like or dislike or grasping or rejection? Just a knowing, an awareness of them. Whatever the phenomena, internal, external, sensation in the body, the sound, a memory, just allow them to arise and fall away. Don't get caught up, as we sometimes do, asking who is thinking this, where is it coming from, who's watching the watcher. Let go of all that stuff. It's not necessary. It's just unnecessary complication. It's already enough complication. Whole of cyclic existence or samsara is a mass of complicated interdependent arisings. Many of them, or all of them actually, according to the Buddha, all of them arising from unwholesome or ignorant mental states at some level or another. Even actions which we might consider very virtuous, like being very kind or giving, they're still under the power of ignorance. So all of this is creating a situation of complexity and grasping and craving. So what we're doing here is going against the habitual pattern of holding, grasping, craving. Fixation is a word used in the Buddhist terminology in the English translation. We fixate. We get, you could say, terribly interested in objects to the extent that we can't let go of them in a sense. We fixate. Can we just gently allow phenomena to come and go? Empty phenomena rolling on. Relaxing with the out breath. Okay, and as part of our motivation, which is so important, since our motivation determines actually how we use our body, speech, and mind in this life, it depends on our intention. So our intention can be guided by principally either self-concern, self-centered attitude, where largely we're just thinking about me and my little world and what I want and don't want, or as encouraged in the Mahayana, we begin to open our world up and include more and more others and the needs of others. Since we recognize our connection with others, our interdependence, their kindness. So we might reflect in so many ways, but we might reflect on how countless people just in this country are suffering due to the lack of a balanced or a sufficient monsoon. May not affect us so much in the cities yet, although we'll have realized the price increases of certain things, quite dramatic, some of them. But think of the farmers, think of people whose livelihood depends on timely rain. The backbreaking work they have done in their fields come to nothing due to lack of rain or excessive rains at the wrong time. Think of them and their families. Think of those affected by floods in many parts of India and now in Pakistan. As you know, we have an incredibly close connection with Pakistan. It's like a limb that was cut off from India. Of course, the whole human race are like brothers and sisters. That's how we might approach it. And in Buddhism, we extend that to animals and all sentient beings, actually. But for us, it makes more sense to initially look closer at hand. And we see all these beings who not only have this physical suffering now of their homes or their possessions and their fields being washed away, but think of their mental distress. Can we put ourselves in their place? Can we imagine what it's like for a house to be flooded and to be rendered unusable, to become a refugee in our own country? It's hard to imagine, isn't it? Unless you've actually been like that. But think about that. Think about the anxiety of the mothers, the children, the fathers, everyone. And this is just a drop in the bucket of the universal suffering that's happening. So here, as we sit together in the somewhat unusual and until recently very unusual kind of space, virtual space, here we have the leisure, the opportunity to sit and watch our breath. We don't have to sit in an abandoned building or in a makeshift tent refugee camp with insufficient hygiene, water, food, power. Where if you're still able to listen to me, it means you have electricity or at least an inverter in your home. So we're really very fortunate. So good to remember these things when we start to complain inwardly, outwardly. Okay. So, in other words, may this session together not just be in some kind of vacuum. We're practicing because we're members of the human race, and we owe it to other members of this race and to animals and others who share this space. And even the beings we can't see, they are sharing this space. It's just we can't see them. We owe it to them to help them be happier and more harmonious and reduce their suffering rather than enhance it through our stupidity, through our carelessness, through our attachment and aversion. So one way to reduce these unwholesome qualities in our mind is to read and study and practice texts, various great teachings of people who have actually realized high realizations of love and compassion and wisdom, and to reflect, meditate on their words, and try to practice it in our life. If we don't practice it in our life, then I guess it's just words, isn't it? It's just more entertainment, spiritual entertainment, which might make us feel good that we studied this or studied that, but if we can't put it into practice, it's a shame, isn't it? It's meant to be practiced. Remember, Buddha became a Buddha. Buddha became a Bodhisattva in order to benefit others, benefit sentient beings, not just to sit quietly somewhere and enjoy some kind of nirvana, but to actually benefit. And the way Buddha did it was to teach for so many years. The way Christ did it was also to teach and to heal and to help people. All the great saints and so forth, the really great ones, the authentic ones, have practiced, meditated, and benefited living beings. Sometimes in unusual ways, of course. Sometimes they had to be quite wrathful. There's not instances actually of Buddha being, as far as I know, in the sutras of being manifesting a lot of wrath, although that may be there in the Vajrayana, but in the basic sutras, we don't have examples like the examples we have of Christ in the Bible, going to the temple and very wrathfully dismissing the moneylenders and all of the crooks who were there using the temple premises for, their illicit money-making activities or whatever. But certainly the Buddha in the tantric texts, Buddha manifests in many, many forms, some of them extremely wrathful. And I guess sometimes we have to be that way too. If you're a mother or father, I'm sure you can't bring up a child for 8-10 years without sometimes at least having to pretend to be angry, or whatever, or using very strong means to restrain someone who's misbehaving. So anyway, the point is to let go of our self-centeredness, which is always thinking about me and my problem, and extending our ability to reach out to others. And that can only happen, don't you think, when we reduce this sense of me, I, me, mine is so strong that obviously we're going to be looking after this thing, this person, me. When we soften that with wisdom and the compassion teachings and practice, some of the barriers come down. But until we can pay attention, the barrier isn't going to come down, because we always will have that barrier of I'm over here and you're over there. It's always some kind of transaction going on. Either I'm trying to magnetize you into my space or push you away. There's always some kind of subtle transaction happening, so long as there's an I and a you in that very solid sense. Because there's fear, there's expectation from my side and your side, if we're holding on to I, me, mine. So I guess these teachings, and in this particular text, is weaning us away from that habitual self-cherishing attitude. That's a Buddhist terminology. It comes from the holding on to me in that cognitive sense. We have the sense of I, me, mine. So of course it's going to lead to behavior which is based on cherishing oneself, caring for oneself more than others. Don't misunderstand this. We're not saying we shouldn't care for ourselves. That would be stupid, because we can't help others if we don't care for ourselves properly and neglect our body and our eating and so forth, and our mental health. Of course, we have to care for ourselves. But the point here is that there's a point where how much can I just take care of myself? I'm just one person. Others are infinites. It doesn't make sense to just look after myself. It's just a ridiculous attitude. A selfish attitude. It's not based on wisdom, let alone common human decency. What would we think of a person in a family or a community who only thought of themselves, didn't care about others at all? I mean, it just wouldn't work, would it? It doesn't work. all of us have survived till today because we've depended on the kindness of other people who at least at some point were not just thinking of themselves. Especially mother, probably. Mother, father, or someone who took care of us. People who are still caring for us, even though we're well into adulthood, all of us here. And I'm a senior citizen, and there's still people who help me and take care of me. And as I get older, more and more, I will need the care of other people. It's hard to just be a hermit in the jungle, you know. So we depend on others. So we must realize that in our bones and not just as an intellectual idea. I can talk to you now because my cook is making my evening meal, you know, and he made my lunch. I make my own breakfast, but then that depends on many other factors. The hen laying the egg and the, you know, people harvesting the oats and so forth. So this text that we might even start on today is based on expanding that attitude of cherishing others and seeing how that is a substantial cause, not only for greater happiness for everybody, including ourselves, but it's a substantial cause for us to become an awakened person, a fully awakened person, and not just somebody who attains nirvana. Nirvana is the kind of lesser enlightenment of someone who is just aiming at their own liberation, which of course is a very worthy thing as well. But as we've mentioned many times before, it's basically only helping me significantly. I get out of the prison. Clever me. But what about the other people still in the prison? You know? So the idea of the Bodhisattva and the Bodhichitta, the great compassionate attitude, is that we work towards liberating everybody. Just as a mother or father, if there was a flood or a fire, they wouldn't just jump out of the building if they had 6 or 7 kids inside, right? They would probably often be willing to sacrifice their own life even to save their children. So as in the quote we had a few weeks ago, the Bodhisattva, the true Bodhisattva sees all beings as like his or her precious child. So of course that person is going to care for others, deeply care for others. Beyond the intellectual level, in their guts, they know the connection with others. Like the sun naturally radiates heat, the Bodhisattva naturally, there's no radiation, I mean, there's radiation without a radiator, is how it's been put by one teacher. There's no sense of a radiator, there is radiation. In this case, radiation of love and compassion. No sense of a center or me radiating. One has become radiation in a sense. Okay, so if we come to the text, it doesn't matter if you don't have it in front of you, but it was posted to you. And I don't think we need it to be put up on the screen, Nivitaji, because anyway, you'll be leaving very soon. Oh, you're still here, maybe. Nivitaji, are you still here? I thought you had to go to yoga. Anyway, whatever. Anyway, you can't unmute. So Shantideva, as we mentioned, those who are here, I don't know if you were here, all of you, he was much reviled and maligned at Nalanda University where he was, because all people could see him doing during the daytime was eat, sleep, and go to the toilet. So obviously at such a great university, people aren't going to be very impressed by someone who eats and sleeps and just goes to the toilet during the day, you know, doesn't attend classes, doesn't study like the other monks, you know. So they hatched a plan to humiliate him so that he would leave the university. and you know, the name of the university would not be, you know, dragged in the mud by people like him. So they decided to request him to teach, and he accepted. And they were, you know, full of glee that he had accepted, because they felt, wow, this is really going to be a good chance to humiliate and kick out this good for nothing. So anyway, to cut a long story short, when they asked him to teach, he taught this text. Of course, it blew their minds. And they asked him to stay at Nalanda and teach more, but by then he'd had enough. He had other things to do. He was a bodhisattva. He had many beings to benefit in different ways. He'd already created unbelievable benefit by revealing, teaching this text. He had other places to go. So he left Nalanda. There is a biography of Shantideva. I can't remember where he went next, but he had a very checkered career, sometimes a monk, sometimes a Mahasiddha, doing all sorts of things to benefit others. But I guess his lasting legacy is this and some of his other texts. The Compendium of Trainings, or Shiksha Samuchaya, is another one of his great texts, which is in English translation. Okay, so he says that he may benefit from revealing this text. His faith may be increased because of these words, but he doubts that it can benefit others very much. It's a humble way of saying that I don't think I'm that realized, so I don't know how much my words are going to benefit you guys, you know. It's a kind of humility that many writers have at the beginning of their text. So he's saying, basically, I'm doing this for myself. I mean, how would you think about someone who's saying right at the beginning, oh, you folks, I'm so compassionate, I'm doing this for all of you, you know? One would say, yeah. Anyway, being humble is a skillful way to go about it. Not to broadcast, you know, it's like having this sign on your head saying, I'm enlightened, all I do is benefit others. I mean, we'd get a bit cheesed off with people like that. So Shantideva was saying he doesn't really think he can help us. But anyway, here it is, you know, see if it can be meaningful. He's saying that if people have enough good karma like me, it may be beneficial for them. In the third verse, he says that. If, however, these words are seen by others, equal in fortune to myself, it may be meaningful for them. Then he says something very important. A whole week could be taken up or more on this one verse because it relates to one of the initial reflections, the preciousness of this human life, which we often forget in our carelessness or our depression or our anger or our lust. We forget the meaning of this human life. He's saying leisure and endowments, the leisure we have with this human life, the great gifts and the opportunities we have with this human life are not easy to find. They're very hard to find because the karmic causes for them are hard to find. Because nothing comes about just like that without a cause. We think, oh, well, you know, mother, father came together, sperm and egg, hey presto, I was born. No, it's not quite like that. That's just triggers. Where did the consciousness come from? How come the consciousness took birth to a mother and father who were able to bring up their child in a place where they could then meet the teachings, study, practice, attend Zoom sessions? You know? That's cause and effect. It has causes. It didn't just happen, hey presto, or God or Buddha wanting it. We created the cause, and the causes for such an amazing human life are not simple. I mean, most beings are not humans. They're insects, fish, animals, and other kinds of beings, according to Buddha, in very unfortunate states where they cannot practice the teachings. They cannot even understand a line of the teachings, or if they do, they can't practice them because of their terrible circumstances. So leisure and endowment are very hard to find. Since they accomplish what is meaningful for humanity, if I don't take advantage of them now, how will such a perfect opportunity come about again? He's saying when we die, and we're all going to die, right? I hope we've accepted that. At least intellectually, we know that we're going to die. And we probably have some inkling that we don't know when it's going to happen. And that's quite disturbing, but yeah, we don't know. So if I don't take up, if I don't make use of this precious human life now, when am I going to do so? When I'm dying, when I'm dead, when it's too late? This perfect opportunity, we might say, oh, well, if there's rebirth, okay, I believe there could be rebirth, so I'll just be human again. Who says that? Who says we're just going to be human again? Depends on causes and conditions. Depends on our karma. The karma that ripened in this life was indeed human karma. There is no guarantee next life those karmas will ripen. No guarantee if a garden is not looked after properly that weeds and poisonous plants will not come up. If those seeds are in the ground in that garden and the gardener is lazy, they will come up and choke the other plants, to use a gardening analogy. So if we're not careful and we just keep on creating unwholesome karma and don't purify our minds, we'd be stupid to think that human result will come from the, disparate causes. To create an omelette, you need eggs, you can't use cauliflower. To create an apple tree, you need apple seeds, not mango seeds. To create a human life, you need the causes of a human life. What might those causes be? Aha, that's a whole teaching in itself. But basically, moral action, benefiting others, not harming. It said that having the aspiration and the prayers to be human, recognizing the benefits of the human life, that is also very important. But especially having a kind of moral life, not harming, prayers, and so forth. That creates the cause. Behaving like a decent human being, when we use the word in different languages, humanity, insaniyat. What does insaniyat mean? What's the vibration you get from that word? Insaniyat. You don't get the vision of a selfish, person who just thinks about themselves. Insan, when you're saying, "Aap insan hai ya kya hai? Aap janwar hai, insan hai, kya hai? Rakshas hai ya insan hai?" Insan is somebody who is part of the human community, right? Cares for others to some extent at least. So we need to create the causes for humanity, for insaniyat. Be a decent, good human being. And if we want also to have the amazing conditions to be able to practice and be in touch with authentic teachings, then we have to be respectful to authentic teachers and teachings now. If we aren't respectful, how could that create the cause for being in contact with those things in the future? It doesn't make sense, really, does it? It's not a proper cause for that. So this brings in the teachings on cause and effect, karma. Actions have consequences. If you think, if you want to say that's kind of scientific, it's just how things are. We can't see it sometimes because we're materialistically minded. We see how apple seeds grow into apple trees, but when we say that this life is created by causes in a past life, that's difficult for us, most of us, because we can't see our past lives. But we may get an inkling about these things by thinking about them more and thinking of the alternative. Alternative is God wants it, Buddha wants it a certain way, or it doesn't matter what you do, results just come, in a random fashion. Or we don't need any causes for results to come about. I mean, all of those alternatives if you check them carefully, they're all a little bit suspect, very suspect. Because if God or Buddha wants some people to be happy and others to be unhappy, then what kind of people are they then to take refuge in? Why would I want to take refuge in Buddha if he behaves in such a biased fashion, or in God? So some thought might bring us to the position where we accept, yeah, it's our actions of body, speech, and mind that determine my future and also my present to a great extent. If I insist on being careless and allowing my mind to go anywhere in any direction, then very soon I will experience confusion, all kinds of turmoil, emotional turmoil, and that will attract unwholesome conditions and circumstances in my life, let alone what may happen in a future life. So this verse number 4 has a tremendous amount connected with it. Not just precious human life, but causes and conditions. And this is carried on in the next few verses. Just as a flash of lightning on a dark, cloudy night, for an instant brightly illuminates everything, likewise in this world, through the might of Buddha, a wholesome thought rarely and briefly appears. You might ask, why are they saying through the might of Buddha? Because don't we say that we are our own master? So why is the text, why is Shantideva saying through the might of the Buddha? Well, this can be taken at different levels. We depend for our good actions often on the teachings of others, on the example of others. That's one way of looking at it. The other way is that we all have an inner Buddha, an inner conscience, an inner goodness, an inner Buddha nature. Through the power of that being awakened, we engage in positive action. But at the moment, he's saying few and far between. There's a lot of weeds and poisonous plants in the garden of our mind, not yet full of only, wholesome plants. Therefore, virtue is perpetually feeble, the great strength of immorality being extremely intense. Except for a fully awakening mind, by what other virtue will it be overcome? So he's saying there is such a lot of pollution in our minds, such a lot of impurity, only something very powerfully positive will be able to overcome that. And the only other thing that can overpower it is what he calls the fully awakening mind. This mind of unbelievable great compassion that aspires to become fully enlightened in order to benefit others and lead others to enlightenment. Just right, I'm not only going to get out of jail, but I'm going to get out of this jail and take everybody else out of this jail forever. That kind of thing. So, and that means everybody. People who help me, people who harm me, people who spit on me, people who take care of me. I'm going to liberate everybody. That when that kind of mind authentically arises day and night, you can imagine how powerful that is, how powerful a wholesome mind that is. It's unbelievable mind. We just said we can generate it, since the mind is even more flexible and trainable than the body. Much more so. Much more so. Inconceivably more so. Many of us may learn to run 100 meters in 12 seconds. A very few of us in under 11 or even under 10 seconds. But none of us will ever be able to run it in 1 or 2 seconds, I guess. But the mind can become fully awakened, fully omniscient, all-knowing, all-seeing, sarvagyani. It is said. virtue is perpetually feeble. Well, look around in the world. Of course, one might say that it's daily acts of kindness that keep the world going, that everybody you can see came out of the womb of a mother, most of them, and that means they were cared for and therefore looked after at some basic level, degree. But that's not virtue. That is often instinct. That is, let's face it, many people, they take care of their children because they're my children, or we expect them to look after us later in life. So yeah, there's kindness, but it's not virtue. Virtue here means something that creates the cause for happiness in the future. It is a positive intention and it creates the cause for future happiness. And to be powerful virtue, liberating virtue, it has to be conjoined with wisdom. The wisdom that understands that there is no inherent I, me, mine. Otherwise, it's always some kind of goodness based on I am helping somebody. That's limited. It's good, better than harming others, but it's limited. Because it's still based on a sense of a center, a me. The true Bodhisattva who's developed authentic Bodhichitta, this awakening mind, has no thought of a me helping others. It's spontaneous activity without I, me, mine coming into it. That is also mind-blowing, right? To be able to act in that way. But it's possible through training the mind. So we see how mind is the essential thing. It's not through taking various drugs or hormones which will affect the neuronal tissue of our brain. Something far deeper than that. The brain is material, it's not mental. Mentality is different from physicality. This is something slowly we need to understand. So Shantideva was saying, since immorality is extremely intense, and we can see that, I mean, we could talk a lot about this. There's a lot of things human beings are doing which are unbelievable. And I'm not referring just to mass murderers or rapists. I'm talking about world leaders who are doing unbelievable, stupid, and selfish things like cutting down rainforests, causing, fighting to happen and bombardments to happen near the biggest nuclear plant in Europe. I mean, imagine if one of those 6 reactors gets hit or starts to leak radiation. I mean, what's happening with people's minds? We just have to say that, yeah, Shantideva says, even in the 8th century, he was saying this, that the strength of immorality being extremely intense. 12 centuries ago, when they had a far more harmonious connection with nature and the earth. Still at that time, Shantideva was complaining about the great strength of immorality. So imagine what he'd think about today. The unspeakable things that are happening today. Unspeakable things have always happened, of course, but I think there's a greater intensity now, and of course a greater power for us to completely destroy ourselves. So he's saying only this great mind of compassion that sees all sentient beings as like our only child and wishing to help them, only that kind of mind is really capable of destroying the great strength of immorality. And he's saying, it's not just me saying this, Shantideva said. Next verse, all the Buddhas who have contemplated for many eons have seen it to be beneficial. For by it, through the Bodhichitta, this great compassionate heart, limitless masses of beings will quickly attain the supreme state of bliss. Saying through that mind, beings will be benefited and not just be liberated from samsara, they will attain the state of Buddhas. because we all have Buddha nature, we can all become just like Shakyamuni Buddha and all the other beings who have become Buddhas. So in other words, Buddhahood is not just restricted to a few people in each eon, but all of us have the seed of Buddhahood. So it goes on in this vein that if you wish to destroy, I'm paraphrasing a bit to make it more accessible. If you want to destroy the sorrows of your life which is conditioned by family, society, your past karma, pollution, all the rest of it, if you want to, but mainly by delusion and karma, our own delusion and karma, if we want to reduce, get rid of those sorrows, and we want to experience tremendous joy, if we want that, Shantideva says, we should never forsake this mind of awakening, the Bodhichitta, the aspiration to enlightenment in order to benefit all sentient beings. And then there's a wonderful verse. He says, the moment we were to generate that mind authentically in our mind stream, you know, for us who are at the moment weak and in chains, in samsara, the moment that awakening mind were to arise, we would then be called a child, the son or daughter of the Buddhas, and we would be looked up to, revered by even gods. The gods would bow down before us. The intelligent gods, not the ones who are fighting all the time amongst themselves. There's a level of gods who are like that, the asuras. But the intelligent gods, I guess, would see that, wow, this person is worthy of respect because, well, because they love me, whoever, and they love everybody enough to want to lead them to Buddhahood. And people respond to that, right? When you meet someone whom you feel is like that, you feel good about them, right? You feel safe. You would entrust your life to such a person. And then there's another amazing verse, the 10th verse. He's likening the Bodhichitta to a kind of alchemical process, to something that completely transforms what it touches. It's like a supreme gold-making elixir. It transforms the unclean body we now have into the priceless jewel of a Buddha body. Therefore, firmly take hold of this awakening mind, this Bodhichitta mind. Right now we have a body which is, although amazing in many ways, a body and mind which can attain Buddhahood. Still, it has many defects, gives us a lot of suffering, doesn't it? And many trials and tribulations come about due to this body and this unwholesome mind that we have right now. But he mainly talks about the body in this verse. He's saying through awakening mind, we can develop the bodies of a Buddha. And the body of a Buddha, there are different conceptions of this according to whether you're looking at the basic Theravada teachings of the Buddha or the Mahayana teachings. According to Theravada, Buddha is basically a person, a human being like you and me, who comes into the world, practices, becomes enlightened. According to Mahayana, Buddha is also those things, although many Mahayanists feel that Buddha was already enlightened before he took birth in his mother's womb. He was already an enlightened being. Anyway, but when a person becomes fully enlightened, they can not only communicate in this human kind of body, they can communicate in any kind of body whatsoever, which can, you know, be a form seeable by other beings, and they can also manifest in a body of very subtle light called the enjoyment body, Sambhogakaya, which can only be perceived and is only able to benefit higher level practitioners, bodhisattvas. They have access to the Sambhogakaya. It's like having a very powerful kind of radio transmitter, transistor, which can pick up certain channels which an ordinary cheaper radio can't pick up. So the bodhisattvas, they have purified their minds, they can pick up the teachings from the Sambhogakaya, or the subtle, invisible to us body of the Buddha. So the Buddha doesn't just have a physical body that you and I can see. The Buddha also has this more subtle body you and I cannot see right now. And also the Buddha has what's called the Dharmakaya, the wisdom truth body, which pervades the whole of existence. So you see, Buddha, according to Mahayana, has many, many ways of interacting with beings. And of course, according to the Vajrayana, Tantrayana, the Buddha can manifest in all kinds of different Buddha forms, male, female, genderless, whatever, that are able to affect the minds of different disciples, because we all need something a little different according to our psychology. So the Buddha can manifest in countless forms to benefit others. And how did that come about? Through the intention initially to benefit others, through seeing everyone as like my son and daughter, having that motherly, fatherly attitude towards all beings. And that creates the cause to be able to manifest in a way that benefits all of them, right? It's like a wise leader. They don't just want to help their subjects through education, they want to help them through all manner of works, through the economy of the country, through the roads, through the agriculture, everything, not just in one way, not just through laptops or smartphones. Yeah, one wants to help people in all sorts of ways. So the bodhisattvas pray to be able to benefit others in countless ways. And then when they become Buddhas, they have that ability to manifest and help others in many, many ways. So anyway, right now we have a body which is so limited, right? You know, we can't even help our next door neighbor. We can't even help ourselves or our children properly, because we don't have the wisdom, the skill, the authority, whatever it takes, we don't have. This doesn't mean Buddhas are all powerful and they can say abracadabra and just help people. We're not saying that either. But as Buddhas, they know how others can be helped, and they have the ability to help when others are open to that help. And the great teachers we know, they may be manifestations of Buddhas, because they're able to teach in extraordinary ways, and they inspire us when they teach, the great teachers. So anyway, the advice here in verse 10 is to don't forsake this awakening mind. It's the most precious thing we can ever hope to experience, generate. And we have been, in a sense, since beginningless lives, desperately searching for happiness. I mean, this is an unbelievable thing to think about. Beginningless lifetimes, we've been searching for happiness. Beginninglessly, and we haven't found it. How tragic is that? So if we develop Bodhichitta, we begin to, not only do we have that happiness ourselves as a Buddha, continuous sense of bliss and joy beyond words, but every single activity of ours is spontaneously helping others. It's like the Buddha doesn't think, okay, now I'm going to go and help this person or that person. It just happens spontaneously, like sunshine. The sun doesn't think, now I'm going to shine on this place, now I'm going to shine. No. Where the sun rays reach depends on how many clouds there are in the way, not on the sun. Sun is radiating constantly. Except that the sun will not radiate after 2 or 3 billion years, but the Buddha energy will radiate forever, everlastingly. The sun is limited in this solar system. Buddha nature is endless, because mind has no end. Awareness, consciousness has no end. No beginning, no end. So you see, from a Buddhist point of view, it's not just the brain matter. It's connected with the brain matter, of course it is, but it is not that. It is not a byproduct of the brain. It precedes this brain, it will outlast this brain. It has outlasted beginningless brains in the past. Human brains, reptile brains, bird brains, fish brains, all the rest of it. And the unseen, formless beings that we have also been. Maybe a little discussion. It's 20 minutes to 8. And tomorrow I will have to finish on time, maybe a little before. I have to go to the airport tomorrow to collect someone who's coming to very kindly run our center in Bodhgaya, the Root Institute. So tomorrow we'll finish a little before time. Today we have till 8 or a little beyond. So if you have anything you'd like to share from my blah blah or something else, feel free. You might need to take a little break even, I don't know. My coffee has gone cold. It's not as tasty as the cold coffee in our local coffee shop. But I'm trying not to be disappointed. Okay. Anything? Anybody? Are you beginning to be inspired by this idea of the awakening mind, or is it just too far somehow right now? We're so caught up, I'm so caught up in my own little dramas that the thought of seeing everyone as my child is somehow ridiculous, even absurd. Or we might say it's you have some kind of, what's it called, delusion of grandiosity. You're not just Napoleon, but you think you're much greater than Napoleon, you know. So, you know, you have a problem. You should be in a psychiatric ward. You might think that. Okay, 2 participants. First, Kanika and then Nitya. Kanika Kohli, yeah. Okay.
Good evening. This was really wonderful. So I think on the point that you said that, you know, to imagine everyone as your you know, your sons and daughters or somewhere like a child for you, is that not an attachment? I mean, just like you mentioned that, you know, it could be a delusion, it could be a notion of grandiosity. I feel that also creates that kind of attachment with the beings. So how does one hold that in life?
Very good question. Good. So let me answer it by giving you something that was asked of a great teacher, and that will give a hint. A student asked a teacher, very great teacher, at what stage could I marry someone and not be in danger of having any attachment? Okay. When would I be able to marry someone and not be afraid that there would be some attachment in this? He said, you'd need to be a remarkably high-level bodhisattva to be able to do that. So don't worry. Of course, there's going to be some attachment. But the point is, if we have a deeply powerful and strong intention to be a benefit for others, you know, and work on our minds through reflecting, meditating, and so forth, then slowly we will get to the perfect stage. But if you want to wait till you're a 8th level bodhisattva, then you're not going to be married for many lifetimes yet. So get married, whatever you need to do, but reflect on the shortcomings of attachment, of strong attachment, and do your practice. Practice compassion, practice loving kindness as much as you can, and patience and all the rest of it, so that when your wife or husband get angry with you, you don't throw plates at them in return. And if we practice well, then there will be improvement. But yeah, of course there's going to be some attachment right now. Don't worry about it. We can't jump to non-attachment with some magic wand. We work with what we have. And the more we think, oh, I have attachment, the more we will get stuck in that. The moment we are purely attentive and act out of, what should we say, present moment awareness, present moment attentiveness, then maybe there'll be less danger of this attachment that we are so afraid of. And of course, which we need to be afraid of to some degree, but it's like, don't create too much struggle in your mind between where you think you are now and the purity that you want to be in the future. We have purity right now, actually. But because of many things, and being taught also in some way that we are very sinful and God and Buddha are so pure and I'm sinful, we have this kind of low self-esteem in many ways. But yeah, we have to work with attachment. We have to reduce it because it is a powerful poison. But we can't necessarily, just use your own intelligence. I think I've said enough. Nitya.
Hi. I actually had a good evening. Hi. So I actually had a bit of a history question, if that's okay.
History?
Yeah.
Oh, I studied history, but probably nothing to do with what you're going to ask. Yeah.
No, I'm sure it has quite a bit to do with what I'm going to ask. So there was a lot of emphasis in this session about compassion and how there were some enlightened people who sort of stopped at the threshold, at the doorway, if you want to imagine it like that, before you pass on to whatever is beyond enlightenment, and who stopped and looked back and said, oh, there are so many people suffering, I should do something to help them see. I mean, this is just a way, I'm just pictorially describing it. And I'm just wondering, I'm like, what? Yes, you made the point about interconnection and interdependence, and that certainly resonates in the sense that there is a obligation to help others, because we ourselves have come to the state we are and continue to do because of our interdependence, and somebody has helped us along the way. But I'm wondering, like, what about all the other people who didn't, right? Like all the other enlightened people who sort of just stepped through the threshold and went on, like you said, attained their own personal nirvana and went on.
They're not enlightened. They have nirvana, but they aren't called enlightened. They have attained nirvana. They are arhats, technically, but they're not Buddhas. Buddhas strive for the welfare of others. Arhats help others while they're alive, but they strive for their own liberation, mainly. They don't have the great Bodhichitta, compassionate mind. As I say, they're the ones who get out of the jail and are happy they've done it, but they don't think of helping the others get out of the jail. They don't have that level of compassion. They have kindness, of course, but once they're out of the jail, they're out of the jail, and they don't think more about the jail. They're in a state of personal peace. Whereas Buddhas continuously work for the benefit of others, spontaneously, because they've created the cause. So there's no question having to, have revision classes, like doctors are supposed to have revision every few years to upgrade their knowledge and be, up to date. Buddhas don't need to update themselves and remind themselves of what they're supposed to be doing. They've created the cause to be Buddhas forever. Yeah. So they're not, there has to be, you have to understand the distinction between nirvana and samyak sambodhi, complete enlightenment. Totally different from nirvana, because nirvana doesn't have the bodhichitta.
Right. So besides the duty and obligatory aspect of it, which obviously makes a lot of sense, is there any other reason to serve other people?
Not a duty or an obligation, it's just through wisdom. I guess when you see your interconnectedness with others, You don't see it as a duty to help them. It's just something spontaneous. When you see an old woman trying to cross the road in busy traffic, and there's this big truck coming and it doesn't look like she's going to make it unless you help them, do you think, oh, it's my duty to help this old lady? No, you just do it. Of course, if you do stand there thinking it's my duty to do it, by then, you know, she may be in big danger. So it's like some teachers say, if there's a snake in your lap, you don't think, oh, there's a snake in my lap. Now I have a duty to protect my body. What shall I do? Well, you immediately do something to get rid of the snake in your lap. So not only does it work on a selfish level to help ourselves, but when we see others who need help, you know, a mother doesn't think, oh, it's my duty to help my child who's about to fall off the table and smash, you know, or poke the fork in their own eye. She just immediately does something, right? So that's what we're talking about with high-level bodhisattvas. Once they have realized emptiness, they no longer think in terms of duty and obligation. They are beyond that. They are more in a spontaneous phase of just doing what has to be done. But there's still levels of skill in being able to do that. Are you getting my drift? There's no conceptuality. Very little conceptuality left that, oh, I should be doing this, I should be doing that. Spontaneous. Once they've realized emptiness. There are, of course, bodhisattvas who haven't realized emptiness. They're still striving for that. They have an amazing mind, but there's still a vestige of I, me, mine, and, you know, I am helping others. But the bodhisattva who has stabilized his or her realization of emptiness or shunyata, they no longer are thinking in terms of I, so-and-so, Kabir, I'm helping others, blah, blah, blah. I should do it. Why? Because they have been my mother and helped me. And no, everything has become by then spontaneous. Why? Because they've created the cause. It's not like it's causeless. Like you ask, why? How come you have this amazing, beautiful garden every year with such amazing flowers? You know, it didn't turn up by itself. The gardener's been working all the year, getting the soil right, getting the right kind of seeds, knowing what to do. Even on that gardening, mundane level, to have a beautiful garden every year, a lot of effort has been put into it. So you could say the Buddhas, as they say, the Buddha spent 3 countless great eons creating the cause to become a Buddha. He worked very hard, lifetime after lifetime, it is said, offering his body, being patient, being generous, all the rest of it. For lifetime after lifetime, creating the cause to become such a sublime being. So, yeah, it's beyond at that stage the sense of duty or sense of obligation. That stage was passed a long time before. But yes, initially it's good to think that way. It's good to think, as John F. Kennedy famously said, let me not, you know, it's not, what's his word? I've got the speech here somewhere, but the famous speech Kennedy made, someone from the 60s, who I relate to, but I'm still old enough to remember where I was when I heard the news of his death. He said, think not what you can do for yourself, think what you can do for your country. Some words to that effect. And he said it beautifully. So, of course, there's that sense that initially, yeah, we have a duty, you know, to our countrymen. We have a, yeah, and it's good to think that way. It's much better than to think I only have a duty to myself. But because of the wisdom aspect, the Bodhisattva has reached a stage where they are beyond having to engage in action through conceptualizing first, you know? It becomes much more spontaneous. And so it becomes less restricted, less kind of, what should we say, contrived. And then the person becomes less arrogant and uptight because they're no longer going around thinking, oh, I'm someone who's fulfilling my obligations to others. We could see how that could become a burden, right? A subtle burden. And we would continually want to be passing that information on to others, you know, like we have our credentials after our name. MA, BA, PhD, da, 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 da. Look what I've done, you know. So, yeah, high bodhisattvas and Buddhas, no credentials.
Got it.
No credentials. They just do what they do to benefit others because they've created the perfect causes to do so. It's very amazing. It's very, very wonderful. And a bit mind-boggling, to be honest. But they familiarize themselves and they say that there is nothing that doesn't become easier through familiarization. Shantideva says that. So just as we can familiarize our body to be a little less, whatever, fat or thin or whatever we need, or a little less lazy, so with the mind, which has infinite capacities, we can train it to engage in extraordinary activity beyond thinking. Because right now we rely heavily on thinking. And we're right to do so in many ways. But thinking also is a stumbling block. It creates a kind of cocoon very often, which is hard to get out of. So we need the fresh air of wisdom, of shunyata, stepping outside the cocoon into space.
Where does wisdom?
Sorry?
Sorry. And where does wisdom come from?
Wisdom comes from first listening and reflecting on the teachings on wisdom. And wisdom comes from within, based on the inputs you get from authentic texts and authentic teachers. Unless you're someone very remarkable who, due to previous life familiarization, are already very well versed, and all it needs is very few triggers, and it triggers your wisdom consciousness. But there's very, very few people like that. Most of us have to study. You can ask Elaine and other people who do the master's program from Tibet House, how you study. And then if you're lucky, you have time after all that to reflect. And then if you're super lucky and conscientious, you go on retreat and you meditate on emptiness. And then if you're super, super lucky, you realize emptiness. And so maybe Elaine has realized it, but many people don't that quickly. So yeah, it takes effort. Wisdom comes through effort, as does compassion. Compassion, we have some, all of us have some. We can all help little old men and ladies across the road without much difficulty, usually. Although now the culture is to watch them get run over and take a video of it, one has to say. There is such immorality around that we'd rather watch something like that happening than help somebody. But in general, we might say we all have the potential to help little old ladies across the road, or even sometimes an insect from drowning. We might feel motivated to do that on some days. Even if it's in your WC, you help a little insect get out of the water. Even if it's a little cockroach, you say, okay, poor dear little cockroach, I know you can't have any option but to become a big cockroach, and I don't like big cockroaches, but what the heck, I know you don't want to drown, so I'm going to help you out of the water. Sometimes you may do that. Wash your hands with Dettol soap afterwards, but we can do little things like that, and then they become powerful, more and more powerful, and then we'll be able to help people we don't like, and be like that Hindu sadhu who told the guy, why you keep on helping the scorpion out of the water? He keeps on biting you. And the sadhu says, well, it's his nature to bite and it's my nature to help. I think that's a wonderful answer. Scorpions bite. Insane people behave like insane people. How can I expect them to behave differently? My dharma, my way is to help others. I'm just going to get on with what I want to do, which is to benefit others. So I think that makes perfect sense. And then when I get to the stage where I'm no longer thinking, I want to help others, it just happens spontaneously. You could say it's just an amazing habit one develops, although habit here has a slightly negative connotation in English, but yeah, it's spontaneously. You could say the sun has the habit to shine as it does 93 million miles away and warm the earth. But to call it a habit is kind of a strange word, right? It just does what it does. Although it won't be doing it in 2 or 3 billion years, we're told. I don't know how they know how long it's going to last. Science is pretty amazing, right? Pretty amazing. Maybe they're wrong, maybe, but I hope it doesn't stop shining tomorrow, because I have a lot of things to do tomorrow. And I'm sure we all hope that the sun will be shining tomorrow, although I hope there's some rain too. So I don't think it's raining yet in Hostel. Is it still raining in Noida? Where were the Noida? Pradeepji, is it still raining where you are?
Yes.
Good grief. You're getting all the rain today. You can blow some over to the South Delhi, please. Maybe it's raining. I just
Sure it will.
Yeah. What else? We had 2 very good questions. Comments? Any more? I'm in for some more. I've been having
Kabir.
coffee, so I have energy.
Kabirji, can you hear me?
Who's speaking?
Ashwin.
Ashwin, please. Yes.
Yeah. So I was just wondering, what are the practices and reflections we can use to let go of self-cherishing and to develop bodhichitta?
Have you studied this at all yet? I'm sure you have. Have you?
A little bit, but I'm not too sure.
Are you Ashwin Lobo?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll be seeing you soon, right?
Yes.
Okay, Ashwin. The practices we can do, the initial ones, I think very useful is always to remember how much we are in a state of dukkha, suffering, the first teaching the Buddha gave. If we can make some kind of relationship, and I don't just mean intellectually, with the fact that I am suffering, and go through all the things, the suffering things, the unpleasant, the unsatisfactory aspects of one's life, in accordance with also what Buddha taught. So it's not just random, but you read what he said: birth, sickness, old age, death. You haven't yet achieved old age and death, but you can reflect on people whom you know who have, or read the descriptions in the texts about old age and death. Then you generate some kind of very powerful awareness of these things, that they're not just intellectual ideas, you know. This is reality. This is something very powerful. This is something very scary and dangerous even, you know. And you wouldn't want to be old, you know. You wouldn't want to be old very quickly if you read about old age. And you wouldn't want to die very quickly if you read about what death means. And then there's all the other sufferings in between, sickness. Study those deeply, what Buddha taught on suffering. And then one begins to realize, hey, it's not just me. Everybody else is going through this to some degree or another, and some are going through it much more painfully than I am. So one thing, I mean, one of our monks, what he decided he needed to do to make his practice more meaningful, he went and worked with Mother Teresa in Calcutta. It was then Calcutta. And yeah, there he had old people dying in his lap. And so, yeah, things like death and caring for the dying became something more meaningful. He could understand it beyond the intellectual level, seeing the suffering, but also the redeeming power of love and compassion for people who are dying. He saw it, he felt it. He worked there for a while. So I'm not saying we all have to go and help, you know, Sisters of Charity, but we can think a bit more deeply about others and how they're suffering. We can look at the meaninglessness of certain people's lives, even rich people, especially rich people who, I mean, one of my best friends from childhood, so rich, but because of what that person did, you know, made a mess of their life. And so one feels for people who have everything they need physically and much more, but are not happy because there's a sense of meaninglessness. So you can either empathize with them because you also feel meaningless, or you can also, because you have found some meaning in your life, you can feel sorry for someone who hasn't found meaning yet, and who is just, you know, groping around in the darkness. And on days when you feel low and depressed and your thoughts are going around in circles in a negative way, think about people who suffer that day in, day out and have no dharma, no teachers who can help them get out of that vicious circle. So then I think one can begin to reach out and look at the people who get rid of your garbage every morning. Look at them. I mean, actually look at them. Look at their faces. And I'm not saying they have to be crying. They can often be joking and, you know, more than we are sometimes, but most of the time they're not. And sometimes they're very upset and angry, and who wouldn't be doing that kind of job? Look at them and say, wow, there's a human being like me. This person wants to be happy. They don't want to suffer. But doesn't look like they're having much joy in their life. So by looking at other people, especially through this kind of perspective, that they want to be happy just like me. They don't want to suffer just like me. They're not different from us that way. And we're super connected to them. We depend on them. If they didn't take our garbage away, you know, even it just takes a couple of days here, there's a garbage heap 70, 80 feet in front of my house under a beautiful Bodhi tree. But, you know, if it's not taken away for a few days, there's this stench in this very high-class South Delhi colony I live in. So, you know, we depend on these people to make our environment livable. Of course, they take the garbage and then the MCD takes it and dumps it somewhere. That's another matter. But think of the people who live near those garbage dumps. Millions of tons of garbage, and the often young people going through that garbage, trying to eke a living out of what's there. Well, there are many ways. This is not even beginning to talk about animals suffering, or if we can conceive it, the suffering of hungry ghosts and hell beings. So, you know, just reflect on suffering, and you will feel, at a certain point, one will feel something. But, you know, just as Rome or Delhi weren't built in a day, doesn't mean we can develop unadulterated empathy or compassion in a day, but it's a beginning, right? So that's one basic way. And the more we meditate on emptiness and the lack of substantiality of this real me, the more we will be able to, in a self, dissolve, if you want to use poetic language, dissolve into others, like the poets say. I always used to remember at school this famous verse, well, not famous, a verse of Pasternak. You may have heard of Dr. Zhivago. Have you heard of Dr. Zhivago? You have, Elaine, but have the younger people? There's a novel made into a famous movie with Omar Sharif. Can't remember the female lead. You remember the female lead in Dr. Zhivago? Anyway, Omar Sharif, very famous actor. There were the poems of Dr. Zhivago in the back of that book. And Pasternak was a great Russian writer, the middle of and early the last century. He said, life itself is only an instant, a dissolving of ourselves in others, as though in gift to them. Like a wedding party, drifting in through the window from the street. A dream, a song, a gray-blue pigeon's flight. So that point where he says that life itself is only an instant, a dissolving of ourselves into others, as though in gift to them. I think that's a great description of the Bodhisattva. There's a dissolving, but we can't feel a dissolving if we're holding on tightly to I, me, man, can we, with all of our armor intact, and our prejudices and our conditioning and all the rest of the garbage. So I think those of you who are poetically inclined, you'll find a lot of helpful imagery and so forth in poetry to help us get beyond this I, me, mine, which is so powerful in us, right? Because we've been engaging in it since beginningless times. That's why. It's said we've somehow, in many lives, probably come close to emptiness or maybe for a split second or whatever, realized it. But then due to bad habits and lack of practice, we just fell back into ignorance. But none of us have, it seems, become Aryas in the sense of have stable realizations of emptiness from past lives. Otherwise, we'd still have it. So we're still floundering and wondering how we can, develop authentic compassion and wisdom. Good question, Ashwin. Does that make sense, what I've said?
Yeah, Kabirji, makes sense. Thank you.
We can go on a few minutes. The coffee is still giving its effect. If you drink rum and coke, you feel high and then you get low very quickly. If you drink coffee, well, I'm sure I'll feel the low soon, but then my kind cook has cooked dinner. Put some more carbohydrates into myself. Vivek ji, koi kuch kehna hai?
Yes, I want to ask you a question, please.
Please do so.
So I've been an educator all my life, and one thing I
Okay.
find very lacking in schools today is there's no focus on what maybe in the past were things like what they call moral science or ethics. And because of that, I think a lot of the kids get sucked into the poisons you were talking about.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
I mean, what is the way out? I mean, is it when we have things like this new education policy, should it not focus much more on things like ethics? How can we bring in Buddhist ethics? After all, that is part of the great Indian tradition. I mean, this is
Absolutely.
fantastic
Wonderful.
Indian tradition, and we seem to be completely neglecting it in our schools, which is most important for our kids.
You may be aware of some of the developments in Delhi schools due to the efforts of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, the social, emotional, ethical learning, the C
Right.
learning that is happening. It's been happening a long time in the United States. Of course, you're right to say that the Bharat mein jo parampara hai, parampara with the meaning of parampara,
Right.
a very authentic, almost divinely inspired tradition that still has the power to liberate us. We have that parampara, but of course, with our aping of the West and modernization, we have forgotten a lot of it and are very foolishly engaging in a kind of education which is actually destroying the minds of children and making them think that getting 100% in a test is a wonderful thing, whereas it's only just showing that we are becoming very clever parrots, machines, rather than empathetic, intelligent, critically thinking and behaving people. So you're right, there's a tremendous need for proper education. Some would say that we don't need schools. And they would also point to the fact many of the brilliant people in the past left school in disgust when they were youngsters and therefore became geniuses and brilliant because they no longer had school to fetter or bind their minds, due to the ridiculous education they were receiving. So what we need, of course, is an education that doesn't talk so much in terms of quantitative terms, but speaks in terms of the purification of character, not emphasizing multiplication of wants and desires, but purification of our minds through ethics, through restraint, through compassion, through wisdom. Of course, this has always been what has partially been taught in the Gurukuls, right? And also what indirectly, I believe, has been taught in all the great gharanas and all the great Guru-Shishya relationships. Because in the Guru-Shishya relationship, traditionally, as you know, in the parampara, the Guru helps the disciple, but the disciple also has reciprocal duty towards the Guru. So they look after each other, they respect each other. The Guru has the duty, didn't they, to look after the needs of the disciple, traditionally. Not just their teaching, but to make sure the disciple was okay and had enough to eat and a shelter and so forth. Now that's, very rare to find that kind of relationship.
How about the Sangha as a model?
Yes, well, if it's an authentic Sangha, but you see, the Sangha needs the Dharma. If it's just a sangha for its own sake, it can become just, like a kitty party or something.
Right.
Gupshup karne ka jaga. That's not the real Sangh, is it? Sangh has
No.
to be conjoined with dharma, and that dharma has to be authentic, which means it needs an authentic author, and we would say the Buddha.
Mhm.
It needs awakened beings to be the, teachers of that dharma, or the origin of that dharma. Although on another level, we can say also that dharma is within us. So the Buddhas help us to realize our own inner Buddha nature, right? It's not like the Buddhas are pouring knowledge into us, which is all new.
Right.
People say that actually becoming a Buddha is more a question of taking away all the garbage that is covering up our Buddha nature.
Mhm.
So there's a jewel in the middle of the garbage heap. Jewel is cannot be harmed, but we have to get the garbage off. So it's not a question of creating the jewel. The jewel's already there. But we have to get rid of the garbage. The clouds have to be dispersed in that sense. So yeah, are you still educating or have you retired, Vivekji?
I'm kind of retired, but I'm still doing some workshops occasionally.
Please do, and please,
Yes.
Encourage children to look within and be confident in their own greatness. As Wordsworth, the poet, said, we are born trailing clouds of glory or something like that. But then we become destroyed by society, education, etc. So we have to remember that children are trailing clouds of glory when they're young. So we mustn't get rid of that glory, And we must see our own glory reflected in the children. Who are innocent. We mustn't destroy their minds by making them afraid of stupid, repetitive exams.
Right.
We are teaching them to be parrots and imitators. That's the terrible thing.
Right.
What Aurobindo said in the early 20th century about India was that in the 19th century, we were imitative, self-forgetful, and artificial, he said.
Mhm.
We were trying to transpose Europe into India.
Right.
By being imitative, self-forgetful, and artificial. Those are the three words he used in his text in 1909 on the Karma Yogin, an amazing text by Aurobindo. You should look it up. It's very inspiring. He said you can never develop through imitating the dharma of another civilization. You have to follow your own parampara. And we were imitating the West, and we're still doing it.
Right.
Everywhere you look, we've imitated them. I'm told that teachers in Delhi schools, at least, are not allowed to wear kurta pajama. You have to wear Western clothes to be a teacher. I was told that by somebody authoritative. I mean, you would know, right? It seems now you cannot teach in kurta pajama. Maybe you'd be termed an urban Naxalite if you do that. It's ridiculous. I go into the metro, I never see people in kurta pajama. I'm not saying I'm superior because I wear kurta pajama. I just find it comfortable and it covers my excessive, thin body very well. I can't wear t-shirts like Bishop or the other powerful people we have in our group, But you see, we're being imitative unknowingly. That makes us artificial and we've forgotten our parampara. As you say, parampara is a very important word, our tradition. If we forget our tradition, we've forgotten our life force, our cultural, religious life force. And it's an authentic parampara because it's connected with what we really are, which is Buddha.
Right.
Not an artificial parampara. The traditional Indian one is not artificial in the sense it's not something concocted by people who didn't know what they were really talking about. Our parampara initially was put together by enlightened beings.
And ironically, this parampara is becoming quite popular in many parts of the West.
It has, whether it's being authentically followed or not, I don't know, but the Beatles and others made some of us Indians aware that, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi and others, I'm not saying they were perfect gurus, but at least it was reminding people of our cultural and religious roots, which we were so busy forgetting.
Right.
By trying to ape the West in our laws in our penal code, in our constitution. It's not an Indian constitution, it's a Western constitution. I'm not saying it's bad, but it's not an Indian constitution, what we have. Nor am I saying it should be a Hindutva constitution. That would be too far in another direction. But our constitution is not created by Indian minds based on the Indian parampara, based on Western ideas of how to, rule. I'm not saying it's a very good constitution. I think it is very good in many ways, but it's not Indian. And of course, we don't follow it.
That's
We
right.
read the preamble alone, which is put in our text.
That's more to the point. We don't follow it.
So we're a lazy bunch of imitators, forgotten our culture, artificial. We'd rather go to a mall than to maybe a traditional, place and buy things made painstakingly with jute and grass and reeds. Of course, we'd like some of those things too to put in our house to show how ethnic we are, but even that is ridiculous in a way. Anyway, now I'm getting political and maybe politically incorrect, but anyway. Your point is very well taken. If we don't educate our children properly, we have nothing good to look forward to in this country. And our challenges are far greater now than they were 30, 40 years ago.
Correct.
Because of environmental degradation and many other factors, climate change.
Right.
We need people who are intelligent and not wedded to this stupid idea of economic growth at all costs. Most foolish idea. Most foolish, because it's neglecting the inner growth. It's just outer growth. Dig up all the coal you can, all the minerals you can.
And actually, if you go to a place in India like Sikkim, you can see the opposite. You can see that people there are responsible people and they're following their spiritual tradition very
Much
well.
more so, yeah. Apparently, some places are degenerating there too. But yeah, by and large, compared to the Gangetic Plain, they're doing very well.
Correct.
Very well. Bhutan too, where I've had the good fortune to travel to twice. Although the second time I went again, I was disappointed, and so were people I met, because they're changing too. Their parampara is being destroyed through internet, film, other factors from outside. Because once you have internet and Hindi movies and other things from Bollywood, you can't protect anyone from those influences. Someone who up till now was quite happy to follow a more traditional lifestyle can now, not only get Netflix or, Doordarshan, but also pornography and anything else. That's going to destroy people's minds.
Right.
The violence that there is on media. Or, the fake news. So all these countries are now susceptible to that. So it's up to the educators like you to save people's minds. Yeah, teachers are the inheritors of that duty.
Correct.
The minds of children are in your hands, in our hands. Parents aren't able to do it. They're just as screwed up as everyone else. They had dreadful educations, poor things. Can't expect them to liberate their children. So yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, we'll stop now. We'll dedicate that our session was not in vain, but some goodness came out of it, and that we may begin to understand empathy, compassion, the importance of the authentic parampara or tradition, to beware of imitating others, unless they are, of course, holy beings, then we could imitate them initially. So let's beware of false imitation, self-forgetfulness, and rather practice mindfulness and awareness, and not be artificial, but straightforward, and not hanker after things that we don't need. That's very difficult for me, but anyway, we must try not to hanker over too many things we don't need, because that's just a burden on the planet. May we remember the suffering of others. May we remember our good fortune. And remember that our good fortune has causes. It's not a gift of God or Buddha. We created the cause. We are master of our life, of our destiny. Nobody else. May we take that to heart. May we also realize the nature of mind, which is the chief, the forerunner, the source of happiness and suffering. And we'll never be able to get rid of our minds because mind is beginningless and endless. So it's what we have to work with. So may we do a good job. May all of us be well and happy, have long and healthy lives, and able to practice as much as we can, and always be connected with authentic teachings and teachers in this and future lives. May all the great teachers have long and healthy lives. His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Gyabje Lama Zogyam Rinpoche, Dzongsa Rinpoche, Mingyur Rinpoche, Taisik Rinpoche, His Holiness Karmapa, all the great beings have long and healthy lives. May all their holy wishes be fulfilled. Thank you all of you for your patience, for hanging out so long. And the recording is in the clouds. So I don't know how you access it. You have to pray for rain, I guess. And the teachings will come raining down on you. So good luck, all of you. Have a good evening. And chew
Thank
your
you.
dinner.
Kabirji,
Ajur.
Thank you.
Yes.
Kabirji, the actress was Julie Christie.
Julie. Oh man, now you mention her name. I had a crush on her. She was Diana
Julie
Rigg.
Christie and
She was
yeah,
Diana Rigg. Oh, Julie Christie. Okay, no. Diana
Julie
Rigg I had
Christie.
a crush on, but Julie Christie, yeah, she was.
Julie
a
Christie, who was
Julie
brought up,
Christie.
who grew up in India.
Did she? Well, there you
Yes.
go.
Yes.
A crush on her and on Diana Rigg. Goodness me. Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you, Kabirji. Thank you. Thank you, Kabirji.
You, Divya. Yeah, I hope you're not fighting with your husband. Yeah, enjoy.
No, we are very peaceful. Huh?
Very good, very good, very good.
Thank you.
Everyone, thank you, Nivita.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Goodbye. Thank you all.
Yeah, good night.